Wuthering Heights is the only novel by English author Emily Brontë, first published in 1847 under the pseudonym Ellis Bell. It centers on two aristocratic families living on the West Yorkshire moors, the Earnshaws and the Lintons, and their tumultuous relationships with Heathcliff, the Earnshaws' adopted son. The novel, influenced by Romanticism and Gothic fiction, is considered a classic of English literature. Although contemporary reviews were mixed, Wuthering Heights is considered one of the greatest novels written in the English language. The work was controversial for its depictions of physical and mental cruelty, including domestic abuse, and for its challenges to Victorian morality, religion, and the class system. It has inspired a series of adaptations in various media. The novel tells the story of the unfulfilled love between Heathcliff and Catherine Earnshaw, and how their unrequited passion destroys them and those around them. Today, this work is considered a classic novel of English literature with a very innovative structure, which is the story structure like a series of Matryoshka dolls. Wuthering Heights has also been adapted into many other genres such as movies, television series, musicals, and even songs. Wuthering Heights is the only novel by Emily Brontë, first published in 1847 under the pen name Ellis Bell. The novel's name comes from a manor located on the Yorkshire moors, where the events in the novel take place. Wuthering is a Yorkshire word used to refer to turbulent weather. The novel tells the story of the failed love between Heathcliff and Catherine Earnshaw, as well as how that unresolved passion destroyed themselves and other relatives around them. Today, this work is considered a classic novel of English literature with a very innovative structure, which is the structure of the story like a series of Matryoshka dolls. Because of this creativity, the opinions of critics on the first publication of Wuthering Heights were very different. Later, many critics considered Wuthering Heights to be the most excellent work. Wuthering Heights has also been adapted into many other genres such as movies, television series, musicals, and even songs. Wuthering Heights Chapter 1, Mr. Lookwood Meets Heathcliff, author Emily Brontë. Genre: Western novel. I have just returned from a visit to Mr. Heathcliff, my landlord and only neighbor who will soon cause me trouble. In all England, I could hardly have found a more secluded place of refuge. It is perfectly suitable for me, for my only wish is to avoid meeting people. My first impression of Mr. Heathcliff is, he is the ideal neighbor in a life of isolation. He cannot know how pleased I am to see his unfriendly attitude. As I urged my horse closer, he stared at me, his dark eyes hidden under his bushy eyebrows showing suspicion. "Mr. Heathcliff?" I asked. In response, he only nodded. "I am Lockwood, your new tenant," I continued. "I do myself the honor of calling on you as soon as I arrive. I hope my stay at Thrushcross will not be a nuisance to you." "I will not allow anyone to be a nuisance to me," he interrupted. "Come in." His invitation was hissed through clenched teeth, as if to say, "To hell with you!" I was curious about someone who seemed less open-minded than I, so I accepted. My horse was pushing against the gate, and Mr. Heathcliff finally opened it. He was walking slowly up the path leading to the house in front of me, calling to one of the servants. "Joseph, lead Mr. Lockwood's horse and bring some wine from the cellar." Joseph came out to lead my horse. He was an old man and did not seem at all pleased to see me. "God help me," he muttered as he led my horse. Mr. Heathcliff's house was called Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights is the local name for anything exposed to the storms that blow across the Yorkshire moors, as this house was. Near the house stood a few young trees, their trunks bent by the force of the wind. A thorny bush, all its branches reaching out in one direction as if to ask the sun for a little alms, added to the gloomy picture. The house was solidly built, with large stones, and its windows recessed into the walls. Before entering, I stopped to examine a large carved stone above the door. The stone bore the date of its construction, 1500, and the name Catherine Earnshaw. I wanted to know more, but the landlord was waiting impatiently for me. Once inside, we went straight into the family parlor. In Yorkshire, they call it the hall. Beyond was the kitchen. At the far end of the hall were long shelves full of tin plates and silver pots. Over the fireplace hung several old guns and a pair of cavalry pistols. The floor was paved with smooth white stone. Several high-backed chairs painted green were arranged in a circle around the fireplace. In a niche under the shelves lay a terrier with its litter of yelping puppies, and more dogs lay in other corners. The room and furnishings were not unlike those of a Yorkshire farmhouse. But Mr. Heathcliff did not look like a Yorkshire farmer. He had the complexion of a gypsy, but by his dress and manner, he seemed to be of good family. He walked up to the fireplace, and I followed him, and sat down opposite him. He said nothing. Meanwhile, the hound had left the pack, and was standing behind me, looking at me. Its lips were curled up, and its teeth were bared. When I tried to stroke it, it gave a long, drawn-out growl. "You had better leave the dog alone," growled Mr. Heathcliff. "It is not to be kept as a pet, and you must not caress it," he said, and kicked the dog aside, and called, "Joseph!" Joseph answered from the cellar, but when he did not appear, the master went down to him. I was left alone with the dogs. 2 of them came up to watch me. I did not want to test their sharp teeth, so I sat still, winking at them for fun. Suddenly, one of them jumped angrily on my knee. I threw him back and hastily used the round table as a barrier between me and the dogs. This excited the pack, and 6 of them immediately attacked my cloak and ankles. I sprang up, seized the poker, and, while trying to keep the dogs from coming any closer, called loudly for help. Heathcliff and Joseph came slowly up the stairs from the cellar. They were evidently very angry at being called up. Though the main hall was in a mad storm of yapping and barking dogs, I do not think they were in any hurry to come to me. Fortunately, a woman working in the kitchen came to my rescue. Hearing the commotion, she rushed in with a saucepan in her hand. She beat the dogs with it. The storm subsided, and when the landlord entered, we were both standing there trembling from the fright. "What's going on here?" he asked angrily. "You still ask?" I muttered. "A herd of wild boars can't be more ferocious than your own cattle. And you leave a stranger with a pack of tigers. They don't hurt people who don't touch anything," he said, putting down the bottle and returning the table to its place. "These dogs are kept as guards. Come, have a glass of wine." "No, thank you," I replied. "You haven't been bitten, have you?" "If I had been bitten, you'd have a big problem with it," I exclaimed angrily. Heathcliff smiled. "Come, you are too excited, Mr. Lockwood. Here, have some wine. They are so rare here that neither I nor the dogs know how to receive them. To your health." I took the glass he offered and toasted it. I realized that it would be foolish to sit sulking over a few dogs. My host was now in a very good mood and began to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of living in such a remote place. I thought he was very clever, and before leaving, I promised him to come back the next day. The next day, I kept my promise to visit Wuthering Heights, although it was a foggy and cold day. After a walk of 4 miles, I reached Mr. Heathcliff's garden gate. The first few feathery flakes of snow were beginning to fall. On this bleak hilltop, the ground was black with frost, and the cold air made my limbs tremble. Unable to unfasten the chain that locked the gate, I leaped over it and ran up the paved path to the house. I knocked until my knuckles ached, and the dogs inside began to bark. It was now beginning to snow heavily. A young man came from the yard carrying a pitchfork and beckoned me to follow him to the back of the house. We passed around the kitchen and at last came into the main hall, where I had been last received. A large fire cast a cheerful light throughout the room, and I saw food laid on the table. I was surprised to see a very young woman in the room. I waited for her to ask me to sit down. She looked at me, but did not move, and remained silent. "It is a very inclement weather, Miss Heathcliff," I remarked. "You should not have gone out," she replied. She rose and took a tin box from the mantelpiece. The firelight illuminated her face, and I saw that she was young. Her face was small and one of the most beautiful I had ever seen. Her golden curls hung loosely about her neck. Her eyes were black and would have been charming if they had not been tinged with contempt and despair. The tin boxes were almost beyond her reach, so I stepped forward to help her. She turned sharply to me. "I don't need your help," she said sharply. "I can get it myself." "Excuse me," I said, stepping back. "Are you invited to tea?" she asked, still holding the teaspoon in her hand. "I would be glad to have a cup of tea," I said. "Are you invited?" She repeated. "No," I said, smiling slightly. "You are the one who is qualified to invite me." She threw the tea and spoon back into the tin and sat down on a chair, frowning. It seemed to me that she was on the point of tears. Meanwhile, the young man who had led me into the house reappeared. He was wearing an old cloak and stood by the fire, looking down at me as if I were an enemy. I could not tell whether he was a servant or a member of the family. His clothes were shabby, his speech rough, and his hands blackened like those of a common working man. Yet he had the air of a haughty, unservant man. I was glad to see Mr. Heathcliff himself enter the room. "You see, sir, I have come."
As promised, but I'm afraid I must ask your permission to stay at your house for half an hour, as it's snowing. "Half an hour," said Mr. Heathcliff, shaking the white flakes from his cloak. "I wonder you've chosen a snowstorm like this to go out for a walk. Don't you know you might get lost on the moor? Even people who know these moors often get lost on a day like this. I can assure you the weather is not likely to change quickly. Then I'll have to ask one of your servants to show me the way. Can you spare one for me?" "No, I can't." "Then I'll have to rely on myself." The young man in the old cloak stopped staring at me and turned to the young woman. "Are you going to make some more tea?" he asked. The young woman looked at me. "Does this gentleman want some tea?" she asked Heathcliff. "Make some tea, will you?" he replied, in a voice so fierce as to reveal the most cruel nature of the old man. When the tea was ready, he turned to me. "Come, draw your chair up to the table," he said. We all sat quietly eating around the table. I thought I was the cause of everyone's misery, so I started a conversation. "Many people," I said, holding out my cup for more tea, "would not like such a life of isolation as you lead, Mr. Heathcliff. But I am sure you are very happy here with your wife." He interrupted me with a sneering laugh. "My wife? My wife? Where is my wife? You must mean that my wife's spirit is a guardian angel who watches over Wuthering Heights when her body is no longer there. Is that right?" I realized that I was mistaken when I saw the great age difference between the two of them. Mr. Heathcliff was about 40 while the girl was only 17. I suddenly thought to myself, that man sitting at my elbow, eating with dirty hands, must be Mr. Heathcliff's son and the husband of that young lady. "Miss Heathcliff, this is my daughter-in-law," said Mr. Heathcliff, confirming my guess. As he spoke, he looked at his daughter-in-law with a spiteful look. "Ah, I see," I said, turning to the rude man sitting next to me. "So you are the lucky one to have that young and charming lady." This remark had a worse effect than the last. The young man blushed, his eyes flashed, and he clenched his fists as if he were about to strike me. But then he calmed down and uttered a terrible curse, which I pretended not to hear. "You are unlucky, you guessed wrong," said the host. "Neither of us is the husband of your wonderful fairy. Her husband is dead. I say she is my daughter-in-law, meaning that she is married to my son." "And this young man?" I asked. "He is not my son, I assure you." Heathcliff smiled, as if it were a ridiculous mistake for me to regard him as the father of such a brute. "I am Catherine Earnshaw," the other growled, "and I advise you to respect that name." "I do not see that I have done anything disrespectful," I answered, inwardly mocking the haughtiness with which he had introduced himself. He stared at me as we continued our meal, and I began to feel awkward, not knowing how to behave among these strange people. Chapter 2, Mr. Lookwood spends the night at Wuthering Heights. When we had finished eating, I went to the window to see what the weather was like. It was a dismal sight. Darkness had fallen too early, and the wind was blowing the snowflakes so wildly that the hills and sky were nowhere to be seen. "I cannot go home without a guide," I said. "What am I to do?" Mr. Heathcliff pretended not to hear what I had said. He calmly showed Hareton how to drive the sheep back to safety. "What am I to do?" I asked again, growing more and more annoyed. Still no answer, and when I looked around, I saw only Joseph come in with the dog's food, and Miss Heathcliff was bending over the fire. Joseph looked around the room and said in a broken voice, "Why do you stand there while everyone is busy? But if you are so useless, it is no use talking, for such a man will never improve. He will go to the devil like his mother." Thinking he was speaking to me, I turned angrily and was about to kick him out of the door. I stopped when Miss Heathcliff spoke. "You horrible old hypocrite," she snapped, "are you not afraid of the devil when you mention his name? Let me tell you, I have advanced in my studies of magic to such an extent. Come on." She took a book down from the shelf. "Let me ask the devil a favor and take him. The red cow didn't die by accident, and his rheumatism wasn't a gift from heaven." "Oh, really it is wicked and evil," gasped the old man. "God save us from evil." The girl glared with feigned hatred, and Joseph, trembling with terror, hurried away, praying in his mouth. Here I tried to draw the young woman's attention to my difficulty. "I beg your pardon for disturbing you, Mrs. Heathcliff, but how am I to get home?" "By the road you came by," answered the mistress shortly, as she sat down to read her book more comfortably. "And if you heard that I was buried in the snow, would not your conscience tell you that it was partly your fault?" "How could that be? I cannot go with you. They never allow me to go beyond the garden wall." "But I did not ask you to go with me, miss," I replied. "Is there not one of the servants who could go with me?" "None." "Well," she answered curtly. "Then I must spend the night here," I concluded. "I hope this will be a lesson to you not to venture so rashly about these hills again." Mr. Heathcliff's stern voice sounded from the kitchen door. "I have no guest room here. But you may sleep with Hareton or Joseph." "I can sleep on a chair in this room," I answered. "No, no. I will not have strangers wandering about here when I am not there," said the rude landlord. This last insult made me lose all patience. I pushed Mr. Heathcliff aside and rushed through the kitchen into the yard. It was so dark that I could not see the exit. Joseph was in a nearby barn, milking the cow by the light of a lantern. I snatched the lantern from him and, shouting that I would return it, ran to the nearest gate. "Master, master, he has stolen the lantern." "Hey, dog," cried the old man, chasing after me. "Hey, dog! Hey, Gnasher! Hey, wolf! Hold him, catch him!" As I opened the gate, two big dogs jumped on my neck and knocked me down. Heathcliff and Hareton's laughter only made me more angry. Fortunately, the two animals did not bite me, but only stood guard, preventing me from getting up. I had to lie there until Mr. Heathcliff called the dogs out. Trembling with anger, I ordered Mr. Heathcliff to let me go at once. I spoke so angrily that my nose bled, but Mr. Heathcliff laughed all the while I shouted. Then Zillah, the housekeeper who had rescued me the other day, came out to see what all the fuss was about. She thought they were attacking me, and not daring to blame her master, she turned to the young man and said, "Well, Mr. Earnshaw, what will happen next?" "Why," she cried, "would I murder a man on my own doorstep? Look at that poor guest, he is suffocating. Come here, sir, and I will cure you." And with this she suddenly threw a jug of ice-cold water down my neck and dragged me into the kitchen, followed by Mr. Heathcliff. Her joy vanished as quickly as it had begun. He saw that I was almost faint, so he told Zillah to get me a glass of brandy, and disappeared into the main hall. A moment later, when she saw that I was feeling better, Zillah led me upstairs. "Don't make a noise," she warned. "The master has strange ideas about the bedroom where he is going to spend his time, and he never lets anyone in if he can avoid it." Once inside, I carefully locked the door and looked around. There was very little furniture in the room, except for the large bed, with panelled sides, under the window. I pulled back the side panels and climbed into bed. I lit a candle, and when I closed the panels I felt safe, and had no fear of Mr. Heathcliff or anyone else. There was a shelf under the window, and I put the candle on it. In one corner were some books, and the rest was covered with letters carved in the paint. The letters were a name in large and small letters, Catherine Earnshaw, and again Catherine Earnshaw, and sometimes it was written Catherine Heathcliff or Catherine Linton. I leaned my head against the window ledge and spelled out the names over and over again: Catherine Earnshaw, Heathcliff, Linton until my eyes closed and I fell asleep, the white letters still in my head and the air full of Catherine's. When I woke again I found the candle had fallen against the cover of one of the books and the room smelled of burnt leather. I began to examine the books. One was a diary, written in a childish, scribbled hand. On one page was a cleverly drawn caricature of my friend Joseph. I decided to read it and learn as much as I could about the unknown Catherine. What a dreadful Sunday, it began, if only my father were alive. Hindley is hateful, and he treats Heathcliff so badly. Heathcliff and I will rebel. This was followed by notes she pressed for details of Hindley's treatment of Heathcliff, and the diary entries for that day ended with, I was sitting here writing my diary, but Heathcliff was impatient and said we should go out and run about on the moor. A splendid idea, for we found it cold and damp nowhere but in this kitchen at the back of the house. The diary continued a few days later. I never thought Hindley would make me cry so much, she wrote. My head aches, but I can't speak. Poor Heathcliff. Hindley says he's a gypsy and won't let him eat with us. He's threatened to throw him out of the house if we disobey. I began to doze as I read, and finally fell back on the bed and began to dream. I suddenly woke up and remembered that I was in a strange room. Outside, I could hear the wind whistling through the corners, carrying drifts of snow. A fir branch rattled against the window. The noise annoyed me so much that I tried to open the window, but it was locked. Determined to break the branch, I broke the glass with my knuckles. I must make it stop rattling the window, I muttered, reaching out. Instead of the branch, my fingers closed on those of an icy hand. A terrible terror seized me. I tried to pull my arm back, but the hand clung to it, and a mournful, sobbing voice cried out, "Let me in! Let me in! Who are you?" I asked, trying to pull my hand back. "Catherine Linton." "I am Catherine Linton," the voice replied. "I have come home. I was lost on the moor." As the voice spoke, I saw a child's face looking in at the window. Terror made me cruel. Finding myself unable to free myself from the creature, I dragged its wrist to the broken window pane and cut at it again and again until the blood soaked the bed sheet. Yet it cried, "Let me in," and clung so tightly that I was driven mad with fear. "How can I let you in?" I said at last. "Let go, if you want me to let you in." The icy fingers loosened and I jerked my hand back, then hastily piled some books up to block the opening in the window. Then I put my hands over my ears to block out the entreaties. I must have kept doing this for a quarter of an hour, but when I listened again the mournful cry was still moaning, "Let me in! Go away!" I shouted. "I will never let you in, even if you beg for 20 years. "But it has been 20 years, the voice groaned. 20 years. I have been wandering for 20 years. There was a slight scratching outside, and the pile of books moved as if pushed forward. I tried to get up, but was paralyzed by fear. I screamed in terror. Immediately I heard footsteps coming towards my room, and the door opened. I sat there, trembling, wiping the sweat from my brow. Finally I heard a whisper outside the door, "Is anyone there?" said Mr. Heathcliff, evidently not expecting an answer. I feared he might search further, so I turned and opened the bedboards. I shall never forget the effect it had on him. He stood near the entrance, the candle dripping hot wax on his fingers, his face as white as the wall behind him. The first creak of the boards startled him as if he had received an electric shock. The candle flew from his hand, and he was so confused that he had difficulty picking it up. "Only your lodger, sir," I exclaimed. I accidentally screamed out of a terrible nightmare. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you." "Mr. Lockwood," he said, placing the candle on a chair. "Who let you into this room?" he asked, pressing his fingers firmly into his palms. "Who is it? I'll have her out of this house at once." "It's your maid Zillah," I said, getting up from bed and dressing quickly. "I don't care if you send her away, Mr. Heathcliff. She deserves it. This place is haunted, it's full of devils and ghosts." "What do you mean?" Heathcliff asked. "And why are you sitting here? Now, since you're here, lie down and sleep all night. But for God's sake, don't make that horrible racket again. Nothing can excuse it unless you're cut. If that little ghost had come in through the window it would have strangled me, I replied. That Catherine Linton or Earnshaw must be a guilty spirit. She tells me she has been wandering the earth for 20 years. I dare say it is a fitting punishment for her crimes. As I finished speaking, I suddenly remembered that Catherine had often written Heathcliff's name in her diary. The truth, sir, I explained. See, I have spent the first part of the night spelling out the name that is engraved on this window. It is a monotonous task, to induce sleep. Like, what do you mean by that? Roared Mr. Heathcliff fiercely. How dare you speak thus under my roof? For God's sake, you must be mad to speak thus, he said wildly, striking his forehead. Suddenly he looked up, and I fancied he had tears in his eyes. You may come to my room, Mr. Lockwood. Don't go out into the yard, for the dog is loose there, and Nasher is in the hall. But go, and I will be with you in a few minutes. I left the room, but not knowing the way in the house, I lingered near the threshold to wait for my master, who seemed to have lost all his wits. He lay on the bed, and jerked the window open, and burst into tears as he jerked it open. Come in, he sobbed. Catherine, come here. Oh, come here once more. Oh, my darling, listen to me this time. Catherine, come here. But the ghost did not answer, nor gave any sign of its presence. Wind and snow came in through the window and blew out the candle. The landlord cried so piteously that I left the threshold, angry at myself for having told him of my nightmare. I cautiously went downstairs and found myself in the kitchen. Here I could relight the candle by the red ashes in the grate. A grey cat got up and greeted me with a mournful meow. I lay down on a wooden bench and tried to rest. A few hours later, while I was lying there, Joseph came in and disturbed me. He came down from the attic bedroom. He said nothing, but slowly smoked his pipe, and then left as solemnly as he had come in. Presently I heard a younger footstep. I was about to say hello, but stopped short. Hareton Earnshaw was greeting the morning with curses. He picked up a shovel to clear the snow from the path. I got up to follow him, but he pointed to a door further back, indicating that I should go that way. I found myself in the main hall again. The ladies were gathered there. Zillah was fanning the fire with a bellows, while Miss Heathcliff was reading by the firelight. I was surprised to see Heathcliff there too. He stood by the fire with his back to me, and had just given poor Zillah a good-humoured scolding. And you are a good-for-nothing, he said now, turning to his daughter-in-law. You are idle again. All the others work for their bread, and you live on my charity. Put that book away, will you? You will pay for always making me look bad. I will put away my book, if you can force me to, said the young woman, closing it and throwing it on a chair. But I will not do anything I do not like. Heathcliff raised his hand to strike it down, but the girl jumped away quickly, curling her lips in contempt. I then went back to the fire, and Heathcliff put his hands in his pockets. Miss Heathcliff sat down again, this time in a chair on the other side. I refused to eat breakfast with them, and as soon as it was light enough I went out into the clear, quiet, and cold air. My host called to me to stop as I reached the end of the garden, and offered to walk with me across the moor. I was glad he had accompanied me, for the falling snow had changed the ground beyond recognition, and I had no idea which way to go. We had little conversation on the way, and parted at the entrance to Thrushcross Gardens. Though I knew the way by this time, it was mid-afternoon before I reached Thrushcross again. Mrs. Dean, my housekeeper, was very anxious about me. She was the more anxious because my adventure had resulted in me catching a cold and a high fever, which had kept me in my room for some time. When I felt better, I asked Mrs. Dean about my neighbours at Wuthering Heights. She was very glad to tell me, for she had grown up there, though she had lived in Thrushcross for 18 years. I had rented Thrushcross as a retreat from the world, and I found myself eager to hear all I could about the strange man who lived 4 miles from me. For the next few weeks I was confined to the house, and Mrs. Dean told me her story, which I will write down as she tells it. Chapter 3, Heathcliff is brought back to Wuthering Heights. Author, Emily Brontë. Genre, Western Novel. Select Volume. I grew up at Wuthering Heights before I came to live at Thrushcross. My mother was nurse to Mr. Hindley Earnshaw, father of Hareton Earnshaw. I grew up with the 2 Earnshaw children, Hindley and Catherine. One fine summer morning, just at the beginning of the hay harvest, Mr. Earnshaw came down from upstairs, dressed for a trip. He gave Joseph, the farm hand, instructions for the farm in the next few days, and then turned to Hindley, Catherine, and myself, who were sitting at breakfast. "Now, my dear boy, I am going to Liverpool. What present would you like me to bring you? You may choose anything you like, but only something small, for I have to walk about 10 miles. Hindley chose a violin. Catherine, who was only 6, could ride any horse in the stable without fear, so she asked for a riding crop. Then Mr. Earnshaw turned to me, promising to bring me a bag full of apples and peaches. He kissed the children goodbye and set off. On the day when his return was expected, the children begged to be allowed to wait. It was not until 11 o'clock that the door was gently opened, and the master came in, groaning and laughing, and saying he would never walk like that again. He opened the cloak, which was rolled up in his arms. "Look, Mrs. Earnshaw. You must take this as a gift from God, though it is as black as if it had come out of the devil." We all crowded around Mr. Earnshaw and saw that it was a dirty, ragged, black-haired child. He looked about Catherine's age, but he could only mumble a few unintelligible words, which he kept repeating. Mrs. Earnshaw would have been ready to throw him out of the house at once. "Isn't it hard enough to bring up your own children without bringing this thing home?" she asked. "What are you going to do with him?" Mr. Earnshaw, though he was nearly dead, tried to explain. He had found the child on the streets of Liverpool, starving, homeless, and half-mute. No one knew him, so he decided not to leave him there, but to take him to Wuthering Heights and care for him. "Wash him, Ellen." "Well," said Mr. Earnshaw, "and give him clean clothes. He can sleep with the children." After they had examined the boy, Hindley and Catherine searched their coat pockets for presents. Hindley, then 14, burst into a fit when he found his violin crushed on the journey home. Catherine, when she learned that her father had lost his riding crop in the care of the strange child, showed her character by laughing and spitting at the newly brought boy. The children would not share a room with him, so he had to sleep on the top stairs. I hoped he would escape that night, but Mr. Earnshaw found him there the next morning, and we were all reprimanded for having sent him out. He was named Heathcliff, and from that day on it was his Christian name and his surname. Within a few days he and Catherine were best friends, but Hindley hated him. Heathcliff was a quiet, patient child, accustomed to ill treatment, and though Hindley beat him often, he never cried. Mr. Earnshaw was furious when he found Hindley beating the poor orphan, as he called him. He believed everything Heathcliff said, and was very fond of him, and Heathcliff made a bad impression on the family from the beginning, for Hindley felt that the newcomer had stolen his father's affection. Gradually, Mr. Earnshaw's health began to fail. He was often angry without reason, and thought that everyone was against his foster son, but in reality everyone in the house let the boy have his way so as not to upset the old man. But this did the boy no good, for his arrogance and fierceness grew more and more intolerable. Mr. Hindley now went away to school, and Catherine remained at home with her father and Heathcliff. She could not understand that his failing health made him irritable, and she found pleasure in teasing him. In fact, she was most delighted when the whole family scolded her, and she defied us with rude words and bold looks. One October evening, Mr. Earnshaw sat in a chair by the fire. Outside, a cold wind howled wildly, but in the hall it was warm. I sat knitting, Joseph reading the Bible, Catherine leaning her head on his pillow, while Heathcliff lay on the floor, his head in his lap, stroking Catherine's hair. "Catherine, if you were always as good as you are now," he asked. She looked up at him and laughed. "Wouldn't it be better if you were always as good as you are now?" Then, when she saw that she had angered him, she kissed his hand and said she would sing him to sleep. She sang softly until his hand left hers and his head fell on his chest. Then I told her to be quiet and not to move so as not to wake him. We were all silent for about half an hour, but then Joseph said he had to wake the master to say his prayers and go to bed. He came up and touched him on the shoulder, but he did not move. The servant brought a candle to get a better look at him, and I knew something was wrong because he put it down and took the children by the arms and said, "Go upstairs and keep quiet because I have work to do." But first I must say good night to father, said Catherine, folding her arms. She threw her arms around him before we could stop her. Then she cried out, "Oh! He's dead! Heathcliff! He's dead!" Both children burst into heart-rending tears. I cried too, until Joseph stopped me. "You mustn't cry so loudly," he said. "Put on your dressing gown, and go to Gimmerton to get the doctor and the vicar." I ran out in the wind and rain, and when I returned, Heathcliff and Catherine had gone upstairs and were there comforting each other. How changed our lives were! Mr. Hindley came home for the funeral, and to our astonishment he brought home a wife, Frances. As soon as the funeral was over, he told everyone he was coming to stay, and that he was now master. Joseph and I were ordered to live in the kitchen at the back of the house, leaving the main hall for the family. Frances said she was very fond of Catherine, but soon grew tired of her. Aunt Frances, who had met him at first, did not dislike Heathcliff, and this awakened in Mr. Hindley all his old hatred of him. He withdrew his education, sent him out to live with the servants, and forced him to work on the farm. Heathcliff did not mind this at first, for Catherine worked or played with him in the fields, and taught him what she had learned in school. Hindley did not care what they did, so long as they kept him out of the way. One rainy Sunday evening, both children were sent to the back kitchen for making a noise, but when I went to call them to supper, they were nowhere to be found. We searched the house from top to bottom. Here Mr. Hindley flew into a rage again. "Buckle the door, Joseph," he cried. "Don't let them in tonight. Everybody go to bed." I went up to my room and opened the window. Although the rain was pouring down hard, I stuck my head out to listen, for I was determined to let them in if they came back, whatever Mr. Hindley might say. I heard footsteps on the road, and saw a lantern burning near the gate, so I threw on my shawl and ran downstairs to prevent them from waking Mr. Earnshaw. Heathcliff was there, but alone. "Where is Miss Catherine?" I cried, alarmed. "Has there been an accident?" "She is at Thrushcross," he answered curtly. "And I would have stayed there too, but they were so rude as to not ask me to." "You will be in a great deal of trouble," I said. "What on earth brought you to Thrushcross?" "Let me get out of these wet clothes," said Heathcliff, pushing me aside and going into the room. "I will tell you the whole story.